It's streaming.
You could go into YouTube and see yourself, maybe.
Can we just get YouTube? Somebody hold the laptop up for YouTube?
I'm going to continue the round.
Mm-hmm.
What could have done that?
I have no idea.
There's no power button here.
Should I go ahead and begin?
So did you take it out a minute ago?
Oh, you don't have the new, right. Sometimes the handshake.
Totally turn this into a BOF and just start talking about really awesome stuff, and that's totally fine. Because this kind of works better as a roundtable to learn a lot of what I'm hoping to present here today, assuming that we get this worked out, as a direct result of basically becoming an engineer, becoming a Drupal developer. I've spent the past 13 years of my life basically working on Drupal. This is looking promising. So I came from the engineering background pretty heavily. Got really involved in Drupal and started working on some pretty big websites pretty early on. Eventually, got to work at Acquia for a little while. I helped build out some of the hosting systems there. Learned a lot about enterprise as Drupal grew. We were involved in some of the first enterprise Drupal sites that were ever deployed. So Popular Science stuff back in the time. Eventually, another website called Examiner.com. So very, very large, very highly engaged teams with a lot of technical expertise that were very difficult to manage. So had to move from basically being a doer and somebody that was always programming to, hey, these are things that we need to pay attention to because we have an operations team that doesn't understand what the web developers are doing, and they need to be able to take care of the websites that we're building in Drupal, and not only the operations teams, but they're operations teams that don't understand open source, don't understand the web, and have very traditional ways of doing things. So at that time, 10 years ago, it was a very interesting conversation to go into an operations room and install Drupal. People didn't know how to react to it. Over the course of time, I got pulled more and more into kind of that bridge, so the DevOps gap of things, and started really understanding that there's, computers are computers. They're zeros and ones. They're buttons. They do exactly what I tell them to do every single time. And if they don't do what I expect them to do, it's because I probably did something to mess it up. I can take full responsibility there. When I work with people, I don't have that at all. People are an entirely different thing to me, and I've had to work really hard to understand that is cohesive, be able to get very opinionated, smart people on board with agreeing on a direction, picking that direction, and then finding a systematic way to measure how they're going to achieve something. Just do distracting, and I'm just going to keep talking because it seems like the thing to do now. But yeah, let me see real quick. So basically, what we're getting at here is a lot of the principles that we use in open source in the Drupal community, they apply very well to business. So what that means specifically is that the unique thing for me about the Drupal community is that we have a global community of contributors and people that have different languages, different cultures, different backgrounds, different objectives that they're trying to achieve with the project. And we have a very cohesive way of communicating. So what that means is that the issue queues have a very specific format. People know that there's specific things that you should probably put into an issue when you're reporting it. Good issues have, all of the details necessary to create it. Good proposals have all of the steps necessary so that somebody who has not been involved in that specific issue can come back 5 years later, 6 years later, and understand the exact context of what's going on. That's effective, good communication. We do that fairly well in the Drupal community when we aren't arguing with each other. So that's kind of what I think needs to be applied more and more into the world of business. So for me, being an American, I think business might be a little bit different in America than it is typically in Europe. And Americans definitely don't tend to work with each other for the same amount of time as I've noticed that a lot of Europeans like to work with each other. So for us, typically an engineer is at a company for a year or two, if you're lucky, and then they're likely to move on to another position, increasing their salary along the way. So for us, it's a challenge being a smaller company to engage people, to make them very passionate about what we create. And what we are creating is not their idea, so it takes additional communication to get them on board with what we're creating, and then basically empower them in such a way that they feel compelled to give their best work to that on a daily basis and not feel burned out along the way. So we have some pretty good techniques to help with that. I'm going to make a book recommendation and a couple of videos. The front slides would have been helpful here, but I could maybe, I don't know, we'll figure something out. So the principles necessary to engage open source community should apply to all organizations. And we have a Gallup poll that basically states that a worldwide employee engagement crisis is currently happening. And what that means is that people aren't engaged in their jobs. They go to work, they get their paycheck, they're probably not happy doing their day-to-day, and it's a systematic problem throughout humanity. Less than 1/3 of employees are committed engaged. Of those, half of them would leave for a raise of 20% or less. And 2/3 think that they can find a better job within 2 months. So the incentive for somebody that has that mindset to stay committed to a project is an interesting topic. It's an interesting thing to think about, because if you can't engage that person, they're not going to give you their best work. They're going to move on very rapidly. So in order to have engaged contributors, you need a culture that fosters motivation. So basically, there's two ways to go to work, right? You either go to work and you're sleeping, you're tired, you're barely doing whatever you need to do. You go get your tea, your coffee, you have your chats with different people, and that's how you do your work. Or there's the other side that basically focuses on motivation. And motivation has a couple of key different components. So basically what we're looking for with motivation is we're looking for the right attitude. We're looking for goals to be set and defined in a way that can be achieved. We're looking to be able to foster ideas, to make people more excited about what they're doing so that they give you things that you're not thinking about, so that as a whole the organization can get better. You want to provide support for people, and you want to provide safety for people. You want to put them in an environment where if they make a mistake, it's okay. It's fine. It's cool. Let's learn from that mistake and let's move forward. A blameless culture is something that you will hear in the world of DevOps, and it's something that is very important to all of this. Out of these key concepts, we increase performance across the board. Oh my goodness, I'm starting to see pictures. Something happened. Okay. I'm not even going to switch to a more professional layout because I'm scared of breaking stuff. Hold on just one sec. Let's see if this works. Okay. So basically, to have engaged contributors, thank you. Thank you very much. Does anybody know what time this is over? Because I have no idea what's going on right now.
Over at 3:45.
Okay, great. So I still have 45 minutes. Cool. So to have engaged contributors, you need a culture that fosters motivation. I mean, that's basically what we're getting at. I think I hashed out most of this slide, so excuse me if this is a little rough. But really, in order to motivate people, you first have to ask yourself, what is motivation, right? I mean, what really motivates people? And so there's this video out there, and you can go to this bit.ly.rsa or /RSA motivate. A gentleman by the name of Dan Pink did a phenomenal job of outlining a study that was conducted by the Federal Reserve in the United States. And MIT, for that matter. So basically, what they did is they wanted to know what really causes people in a professional environment to perform better. And they immediately associated financial reward as a motivation to be able to get people to perform. And what they learned was a little bit shocking, and maybe kind of defying logic a little bit, or at least their logic at that time. And what they figured out is that if you incentivize somebody who is doing a non-cognitive task, it is very likely that through financial rewards, you can increase performance by increasing financial rewards up to a certain physical threshold. And they've proven that. You get that with construction workers, road workers, anybody that's doing physical things. Once you move into a cognitive space, you have the exact opposite effect. The more money that you use to incentivize somebody who is performing a cognitive task, the more likely it is that they will underperform other peers that are more motivated. So what does that actually mean? Right? That's pretty profound, especially coming from something like the Federal Reserve and MIT in the United States. They didn't believe it. They didn't believe what they were seeing. So basically you're telling us through this science that all these highly paid CEOs and executives are underperforming, and that we can't really expect better performance as a result of incentivizing them. And yeah, that's exactly what we're saying. So they went to India to try and figure this out, and they used a scale to increase the effect of the financial reward. So they went and did 3 different tiers. They said if you perform, normally, you'll get this much, and that's going to be a week's worth of your salary. If you perform at this bar, you're going to get 4 weeks worth of salary, and if you perform at this bar, you're going to get 3 months worth of salary. They found that the people that were at the top performed the worst. The people that were at the bottom performed the best. So they basically eliminated the financial conversation completely and had to focus on what was left, right? And I think I have slides that support some of this. So typical motivation seen with the organization focuses on money, reward top performers financially, ignore bottom performers. That's a typical makeup in an organization. People in the middle are acknowledged and get a little bit. Those are your typical doers. Money is a motivator at work, but not how we think. And then there are 3 basic factors. So there's autonomy, mastery, and purpose. And these are the things that do not include finance. So in order to properly motivate somebody, you have to give them autonomy. It contradicts traditional management styles. It completely breaks the mold. If you want engagement, then self-directed is better. So what does that mean? Right? So we come up with a nice little set of rules and kind of guidelines to help us do that. We call them OKRs. OKRs are objective key results. It's a management technique that is used in Google. It's used in Intel. It actually came, I believe, from Intel. It actually came from way back in the industrial age. Intel adopted it, made it very well. Some of the lead managers in Intel were some of the first round investors in Google. They sat down with Sergey Brin and whatever the Eric guy's name is. I'm not a Google fan. And basically showed them this OKR system. Google adopted it very early on when Marissa Myers and all those people were there. And it has become a staple at Google over the course of time. So providing autonomy to allow people to come up with ideas to self-serve what they see as a problem space is critical in this conversation. Mastery, the urge to get better at stuff. Musical instruments don't make sense economically, but people do it because they enjoy it. That's a profound thing. Why does somebody learn to play a guitar? Why does somebody learn to beat on a drum? They're not getting paid for it. They're not getting anything out of it other than that mastery. So mastery is an important concept for humans. And then purpose is the reason for which something is done or created or for which something exists. The person's sense of resolve or determination. If you don't have purpose, then it doesn't matter how much autonomy and mastery you're in control of, you're lost. You don't know where you're going. You're walking in circles. It's like, oh, I can do lots of cool stuff, but what am I going to do with it? Where am I going? There's no purpose. There's no end result. So open source communities are comprised of people that already have jobs from all over the world that are performing technical work on par with their jobs, that are doing it for free in limited spare time. That is, again, something that is just completely profound, and it goes back to everything that I've been saying. You must have purpose to attract better talent. When profit motive gets unmoored from the purpose motive, bad things happen, bad products, bad customer service, etc. In order to attract, like, I have to interview so many engineers in the United States, and because we do things in maybe close to bleeding edge technology, so we use a lot of Kubernetes, we use a lot of Docker, a lot of high-end infrastructure stuff. These happen to be the same jobs that are in demand at Google and Cisco and Twitter and GitHub, all of which are in my neighborhood where we run our offices. So I have to compete with them on a hiring basis. And I hear regularly, I can get 200,000 from Google, I can get 300,000 from Cisco, and Google told me that I just bring the offer letter from Cisco and they'll beat it. What are you going to do for me? So in order to be able to compete with it, I can't compete financially with Google. So I have to make a case that we are more empathetic, that we will support your love of autonomy, mastery, and purpose, that we have ethics and morals behind what it is that we are attempting to create, and that we are going to help people as a result of what we are doing. Here is our purpose, here's where we are going, and here's how we're going to achieve it. And that resonates with these engineers all the way to the point where not everybody will do it. Some people want the $200,000 or $300,000 a year paycheck. But the ones that really matter, the ones that I want to work with, they're the ones that are going to be like, okay, I understand what you're saying, let's build something amazing. And that's what this type of system does, is it gives you the ability to engage with people on that level. Again, simply by providing autonomy, mastery, and purpose. So how does this work? You need to build a framework for autonomy and mastery. Basically, we have a lot of very specific tools that we use to do this that are very focused on open source and are derived from a lot of the things that we've learned through open source. So the first thing that you need to do is have a public face. You need to have something that everybody knows. This is where you go to understand who we are, where we're going, and what we're doing. A lot of times we use GitHub for that. It pulls together a lot of different things for us. Not only does it do, the technical projects like DWI or DDEV or whatever, but it also has a community repository that's pinned up there. And inside that community repository, you can go and understand everything about who we are and what we do and how we work. And it's public. So anybody that is interested in coming to work with us can evaluate this, knows what we do internally and how we get work done. We tell people how to generate a request. We tell people how to work with this system from an engineering perspective, and basically what our norms are. It's very important for people to understand at a high level what the motivation for the company is and why we're doing the things that we're doing. So for us, it's pretty straightforward. We've summarized it in a small amount of data. We're here to help developers shine. We make access to solutions ubiquitous. We want them to be easy for people. We empower the little guys. Drupal is full of agencies. Drupal is full of individual people that are trying to achieve good things, that are changing their lives by contributing and learning that they can make a living off of it at the same time. Helping to empower that and enable that instead of creating a bunch of large companies that eventually suck up all of that work and effort, and it's just, there's a slight difference there. So the drug vision is ethical by design, helping people not become obsolete. The industry's changing. DevOps is very rapidly moving. Hosting has changed dramatically over the past 5 to 6 years. People that don't understand that or cannot keep pace with that are no longer effective and have not realized it yet. All the way to the point where in another 5 or 10 years, you will not be able to compete with your peers that have realized it and have moved on to these different systems. It's something to pay a lot of attention to because it's important. Again, we have a code of conduct, and again, this goes back to safety. Everybody has to feel safe in the environment, if I have a brilliant engineer who has done 90% of the code work for a specific product and has a lot of really great ideas and opinions and has really contributed and maybe has been there since the beginning, and that person suddenly decides that they're just going to be a jerk, and they treat people poorly in chat rooms, and they drop snarky comments at meetings, and they're not participating in the productive direction of the company, that person needs to be removed for the sake of everybody else in the company. And it doesn't matter how good that person is. That was a very hard lesson for me to learn, because trying to build a company, trying to build a startup, you want the best technical people there. And sometimes the best technical people are not the best people. And that's something that you need to learn to adjust to. And if you set the guidelines up front, it's a very easy conversation. When you joined the company, this is what we had in place. This is what was expected. This is what you're doing. It does not fit. Apologies. And our pledge is we want to enforce this. We want to let people know that we're willing to go to bat for them, that if they come to us and are presented with something that makes them uncomfortable, that the organization will take care of them. That's a very important thing to do. Workflow of drug projects, again, very, very simple stuff. I mean, it's not complicated. Somebody creates a request, somebody reviews the request. Is it important enough to stop development right now and fix it? Do we need to pay attention to this now? Are we interested in it someday? No, it goes on and on. It's just every level of every single choice is already outlined as far as these workflows are concerned. And it's important for people to have that structure to be able to work autonomously so that they can have their mastery and then they can have their purpose. When you don't have to worry about the underlying tools and you don't have to worry about the underlying complexity because you have a guideline in place, then you have the freedom to create. You have the ability to realize what you really want to be working on instead of all this other stuff that just causes headaches and distracts. So workflow for drug projects, very similar to how we create a request in that you begin development, you're a developer, you've received a work request, it's already in process. Is it actionable? No, I need more information. This is how you go about doing it. Can I work on it? Yes. Does it need documentation? Does it need tests? What's the deployment process? That kind of stuff all outlined very clearly and succinctly. And then it's just fucking be nice. It's such a weird thing for people. But here we've got a great issue from Randy Fay. So I don't know, gentleman, and Gilbert Soft here is not a member of our organization, but he went through and did some work for us, came up with some great ideas, and the first thing that Randy does is he thanks them every single time. It's not, oh my God, no, you're wrong. I don't even understand what you're saying. It doesn't even matter. It's just like, thank you for your effort. Thank you for taking the time to do this. Let's work as humans, and now let's pull this in because this is something that we hadn't thought of before. So even on a small level, every single engineer in the organization, every single person in the company, if they reflect these values and they believe in providing this same level of help and the same level of service to people, then this is the end result. And this is fantastic. It encourages people. It makes people want to contribute more. It's just amazing. We get benefit from that. They get benefit from that, and we move forward. So build a framework for autonomy mastery. Again, just building on that a little bit, a lot of things that we do are pretty complicated. So part of the process in GitHub is we have significant amounts of tests that go through to make sure that everything's kind of where it needs to be. Now what that does is kind of like how these guidelines were in place for how to get an issue, how to get a request. This is the exact same thing. We focus on the concept of checklists. It sounds super duper simple, but if you can write out a checklist and tell me everything that you want to enforce, and then you can run through that checklist repeatedly every time an event happens, then that's prime for automation. And at that point, we can automate it, we can put it into tests, and then nobody has to do that again. And that's a very important part of all of this. So we are very systematic about how we outline what we're going to work on. We're very systematic about outlining the checklist with execution to solve the problem. And then we're very systematic about taking those and moving them into automation. Instilling that kind of a process in your workflows is important and something that will benefit you greatly in the long run. So all of this, not all of this, but what I'm about to go over next is covered pretty heavily in a book called Measure What Matters by a gentleman named John Doerr. John Doerr was the first investor in Google. He put $12 million into Google, and he brought this concept that I'm about to go over with you to them. So typically, in order to drive a ship or in order to understand where you're going, you have to have some kind of a map, right? Let me see my slides here a little bit. Let me show you exactly what our map looks like. And again, this is going to be a little rough because I was a little distracted by the technical assistance we had earlier. Let me pull this off of YouTube. So what I'm showing you now is exactly what we report in my board meetings. When I sit down with my investors and we're in the board meeting, we start the meeting with this spreadsheet being sent out a couple days before, and they go through and they read this spreadsheet, and they have the ability from here to understand every single thing that we are working on across the entire organization. And that sounds pretty profound because if you look at this spreadsheet, there's not a lot on here. Basically, the idea here is that in order to be effective, even at a large organizational level, you can only ever completely focus on 3 to 5 things at a time. If you define those 3 to 5 things and set them as top-level objectives, like the 5 day-to-day deployment steps are demonstrable against our live production cluster via SCLI, that's a very high-level objective. In order to get to that objective, I need to come up with 3 to 5 key results that I can use to definitively say, did this happen? Did this not happen? 0, 1, yes, no, there's no gray area. That's why you see percentages to the right of that. Those percentages are derived from GitHub. So a lot of times when we go through, and hopefully I'm signed into everything, yay. When you go to GitHub, we basically set it so that as you go through and outline your tasks and actions and acceptance criteria, that they are represented in checkboxes. Checkboxes can be turned into a percentage, which can be fed back to the spreadsheet. It's not an accurate form of percentage, but it does give us a metric. And even if that metric is incorrect or not completely accurate, it is still a metric that we can use to make decisions off of. And we start moving in a very process-oriented, thought-oriented way of decision-making. So when you see percentages like this, that's kind of what that is. It's really important, again, like I started all of this by talking out a little bit about being safe to fail, right? So failure has to be built in as a first-class citizen in the way that you operate and manage your business. And for us, what that means is that we focus at a 60 to 70% threshold. Now, when we go through and do this, we do this on a quarterly basis. We sit down, we plan it all out. We involve the entire team. We have deep conversations and drink lots of coffee. It kind of all comes together at the end, and it creates a really, really nice system. When I go through and look at a specific item, and the investors look at it, they can go through and basically evaluate. We add weekly notes to keep the reporting simple, so that if they need additional information without going into the GitHub queue and reading the comments and doing the research themselves, we summarize for them just to make it a little bit easier. And it works out pretty good. This is Q3 for us, so as a company, we seem to be tracking okay. We're at about 47%. I'd like to see a little bit more happen before the end of the quarter, so hopefully we step it up a lot. But if you look, we've also been able to prioritize these items based on what we believe to be the most important, and towards the bottom you start getting into documentation, slower stuff like that. The key concept here, and something that can be represented through a visual, is that if you have a top-down management structure, that person at the top might say, hey, I want to do X. And that's likely I want to increase sales 15% or something like that. So they set a directive to the entire organization. We have to increase sales 15%. So salespeople go. And they start marketing and they start selling stuff. Nobody talked to technical engineering. Next thing you know, lots of sales orders are coming in, but they're not able to process them because the tech's not quite where it's supposed to be, or something similar, or the system starts going down because you've suddenly increased load. Now we can't sell anymore. Now sales is freaking out. Now CEO's like, what's going on? If you take an inverted pyramid and you fill it with a bunch of large ideas like that, and you say it's an inverted glass pyramid, and you shake it really hard, it's going to break. The glass is going to shatter, and it's going to have no structure. If you take those same concepts and then you open it up so that the people that understand what's happening in the system have the ability to participate in that and fill in their smaller ideas. Oh, you want to do that? That's interesting, but I'm working on this cool project over here, and I think that could help you. Here, let me modify it a little bit, and suddenly you've got all those smaller pieces filling in to support the larger one in a more organic way that that initial directive of increase my sales by 15% wasn't able to account for. And that's a very important concept here. You empower the people that work for you or with you to help you solve the problem in the way that makes the most sense on an organic, organizational level. And that's a very important concept. Out of that, you get great ideas. If you have people that are participating in this process that know autonomy, know mastery, they know their purpose, they're going to want to help. You have to listen to them. You know, it's the famous Steve Jobs quote that everybody, throws around without understanding is we don't hire smart people to tell them what to do. We hire smart people because they can do things we can't, and we value that, and we want to empower them to make us great. So that's what this is all about. Any questions on this so far? Cool.
Coming up to the 5-minute mark.
All right. Yeah, so I don't know, slides are kind of messed up at this point, so we'll just click through a little bit and kind of speed it up. So another system of execution component that we use pretty strategically is intentionally stopping people from working. Because an engineer who is motivated, who has autonomy, who has mastery, who has purpose, suddenly feels like they don't want to sleep anymore, and they're working an excessive amount of time, and you're like, slow down. Take a break, because you're going to burn yourself out. And if you have these really awesome systems because you've done those checklists and you have that autonomy in place and you have automated systems taking care of a lot of work, these people can move really fast. So you need to cause mental disruption, otherwise you're going to burn people out. And for us, we have it set on the schedule. We go through very specific time periods. So we have a release window where people aren't actively writing code. We have a retrospective. We do meetings kind of all stacked in similar days. So we know that, hey, this is a planning thing. Put off your engineering hat. Let's plan. Let's make sure that we do this properly. One of my engineers made the most famous, well, I'm going to make it famous. It was the most brilliant quote that I've ever heard. He's like, I can save an hour planning meeting by just doing 20 hours of coding. So what does that actually mean? Well, instead of going to the planning meeting, a typical response from an engineer, I understand, I'm just going to go build. And you leave me alone, I'll go heads down, I'll deliver what you want. And then the stakeholder that made that request says, okay, and then they don't get what they want. So being able to align those priorities is incredibly important. If you spend an hour planning, you could spend 3 hours coding instead of 20 hours coding, and you can deliver exactly the right thing. There's a subtle difference there, and it's orders of magnitude of impact on the people that are working on a day-to-day basis. So somebody who feels like they have to just scramble to do that 20 hours of coding because they don't have the right acceptance criteria in place, they haven't had the right definition, they don't understand what's going on, or where the ship's going, or what the objective is, they're going to feel more stressed as they do that work than if they know that a good plan is in place. We've talked about it, we understand what we're doing, we know what the goal is, here's my parameters, okay, I can take that, I don't have to stress about it, and I can just do the work. It's a subtle difference, but it has huge impact in retention, in employee happiness, in the effectiveness of your company, and in the quality and effectiveness of your products. So. pulling all of this up out of the OKRs. You saw this kind of linked in. We use GitHub boards. On top of GitHub boards, we use something called ZenHub. So we have the ability to, again, focus on the metrics and being able to associate epic points with these things give us a little bit of fuel gauge. And I'm going to go ahead and speed it up a little bit just because we are pretty much out of time. So this is awesome. It is our choices that show what we truly are far more than our abilities. So what that means is I am by no means a super smart person, but I know that if I engage people in a certain way, that I'm going to be able to become more powerful. I'm going to be able to become stronger at what I'm doing. I'm going to be able to be better at everything that I do because I can learn from a collective experience. It's why we're here at a Drupal event. It's why we do open source, and I believe that it's a very powerful motivator. So thank you very much for your time. Sorry the presentation was a little bit scrambled, but I hope you enjoyed it.
So you have about 3 minutes for questions.
Yeah. Anybody? I know that was a lot. Did you enjoy it? Did you not enjoy it? You liked?
Will your slides be available later on?
Yes, I believe they are going to put all these online, and they will be on YouTube as well. And I'm on Twitter, CyberSWAT. I work at drud.com. Feel free to reach out. I'm very easy and approachable, and I like talking. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thanks.